Hi, I'm Scott with biblestudying.net, and we're finishing up our study on the existence of God, atheism, and theism. And what we're taking a look at and what we're showing is that science and logic demand the existence of God as a being who created the universe. And so we've gotten pretty far in that. We've seen that the universe has a beginning. We've seen that it therefore must have a cause, that we need to assume that that cause is eternal, and then immediately preceded the universe's existence, and therefore the cause of the universe is distinct from the universe because the universe couldn't have created itself. So we have shown that science and logic necessitate the existence of an eternal cause immediately preceding the universe that's distinct from the universe that brought the universe into being. Then we brought up the question of intelligence. Is the cause of the universe intelligence? And so as our email that we read from earlier points out, this is of critical importance. It says, I'm an atheist to the core. I've asked for evidence and often haven't received any that couldn't be explained by other, often simpler means. These could be considered a non-Christian definition for God, a mindless or non-thinking God, more like a computer program than a living being. I have no problem if God turns out to be a mindless robot versus a mindful being. So this question of intelligence is important. If the cause of the universe is unintelligent, maybe it's an algorithm or some unknowable force, then we don't have God in terms of what we've been talking about. We might have something akin to mysticism, but we don't have what we've been talking about in terms of monotheism, a personal God, like Judaism and Islam and Christianity have taught. And so we looked at one proof for this already. The cause of the universe must have been intelligent in order to bring the universe at a particular point. If it was unintelligent, the universe would have existed as a result of the cause merely existing. The cause is eternal, but the universe isn't. It had a beginning, not a finite point of time ago. And so therefore, it implies that the cause of the universe must have been intelligent and had the choice to bring the universe into existence at a particular point in the past. The next issue deals with a particular phenomena that's a part of the universe. As we study the aspects and phenomena that occur in the universe, tells us about the universe itself, tells us about the cause of the universe. This particular phenomena is the origin of life. What do we know about this? What does it tell us about the cause of the universe? Well, pretty simple. We have a basic scientific understanding that is that life cannot come from the spontaneous assembly of non-living inorganic material. We've known that. This goes back to the 1700s and 1800s. In their article on spontaneous generation, Encyclopedia Britannica says, spontaneous generation, abiogenesis, a hypothesized process by which living organisms develop from non-living matter. The archaic theory that utilizes this process to explain the origin of life. By the 18th century, it had become obvious that higher organisms could not be produced by non-living material. The origin of microorganisms such as bacteria, however, was not fully determined until Pasteur proved in the 19th century that microorganisms reproduce. World Encyclopedia says spontaneous generation, the belief now discredited that living organisms arise from non-living matter. The Gale Encyclopedia of Science says spontaneous generation, also called abiogenesis, the belief that some living things can arise suddenly from inanimate matter. And finally, also from the Gale Encyclopedia of Science, it says origin of life, that's the article. It says, during the medieval period, for example, European scholars argued that small creatures appeared by spontaneous generation or natural self-assembly of non-living ingredients. Then it goes on to talk about how Pasteur and others at that time, other scientists, thoroughly disproved the theory of spontaneous generation as an explanation for the origin of life on whatever scale. So we know scientifically that living material, life, the living cell, cannot originate from the spontaneous assembly of non-living inorganic components. We know that. What has current scientific research in more recent periods shown? The same thing. Life can't come from non-living material. It's also shown, incidentally, that in order to get life, in the components of life and the components of the cell that aren't produced by unintelligent natural conditions, it takes intelligent agents, it takes intelligence, scientists, researchers, creating, engineering, fabricating things that we do not find in nature, components of the cell, of living material that nature and unintelligent causes won't produce. So let's look at some articles. The first article from American Scientists just reports that an important rule in the exercise is to reconstruct the earliest events in life's history without assuming they proceeded with the benefit of foresight. Any hint of teleology must be avoided. Why? Well, because science tends to look for causation rather than design as the explanation for why a phenomenon occurs. That's totally fine. So in order to prove that life can originate from unintelligent causes, you have to set up experiments in which there's no intelligence involved. Therefore, you have to avoid foresight and teleology. You have to avoid fabrication and foreseeing a difficulty and trying to overcome it. So let's keep reading from the American Scientist. It says, abiotic chemistry, which aims to reproduce in the lab the chemical events that initiated the emergence of life, it has produced amino acids, sugars, the nucleic acids, but often under more contrived conditions and in lower yields than one would expect for a prebiotic process. So what they're saying is that unless we contrive, unless we design, unless we set up and engineer these things as scientists, we don't produce what is necessary for life to come together, even the basic components, the inorganic compounds that are necessary for life. And so this is, the next article is from Discover. It's commenting on the famous Miller-Urey experiment, and it says, the Miller-Urey experiment, the problem is that subsequent research has swept away a lot of these ideas in which Miller and Urey attempted to set up the atmosphere and conditions of the early Earth and see if organic material life would originate from the interaction of these conditions. It didn't. They got some organic compounds that could be used for life, but they didn't get life itself, and now we know that the research has shown that their results are irrelevant because it isn't reflecting what the early Earth was like. If they would have, they wouldn't have gotten anything even close to what they did get, and in no condition did they actually get life. So Miller, Stanley Miller, of these experiments is reported in this same article to be commenting on the current status and current understanding of how life originated. And it says, even Miller throws up his hands at certain aspects of it. He says, that's easy, very easy, he says, the sarcasm fairly dripping. That's a quote from the article. It says, just like it's easy to make money on the stock market, all you have to do is buy low and sell high, he laughs. Nobody knows how it's done. Some would say this statement applies as well to the other easy steps, including the creation of simple organic compounds. So according to Miller, nobody today knows how any of this happens, how life originates, or even how the inorganic compounds that are necessary for life come together. From the American Scientist, again, it says, reporting on various scenarios that they're suggesting for how life could have happened, and it says, in conclusion of the scenarios, this scenario is extremely complicated and highly unlikely. It's unlikely that natural, unintelligent conditions could accomplish these complexities that are required for life to emerge. This next quote here, also from them, says, efforts to reproduce these in the lab have only been partially successful. Why have they been partially successful, or how? Well, they've been partially successful when scientists get involved to engineer and fabricate things we aren't finding in the natural world from unintelligent causes. And so MIT reports in their article of a particular professor in the Department of Chemistry and his colleagues there who have created an extraordinary self-replicating molecular system, and then it goes on to call that a laboratory-made molecule. And if you read the article, you'll find out that what they've done is they put together a particular RNA molecule that can self-replicate. Well, we don't find anything like that in the natural world. They've fabricated something, they've designed something that nature doesn't produce on its own, that unintelligent causes won't come up with. And we have intelligence now doing what nature cannot do, overcoming what obstacles that nature can't overcome. And so then concluding on their views of the modern research into the origin of life, American Scientist says, attempts at engineering with considerably more foresight and technical support than the prebiotic world could have enjoyed have failed so far. So we can't do this. We are trying to do it. We can be successful if we get involved in design and fabricate and engineer. That's intelligence involved. But without us involved, the natural world doesn't come up with this. Unintelligent causes can't produce life. That's what we know from science. Very simple, very obvious. And so we have these two reasons why we have to assume that the cause of the universe is intelligent. And the second one then is that life, a particularly important part of the universe, a phenomenon of the universe, requires intelligence. We know scientifically that life won't happen without intelligence. So we know that also that intelligence can get involved and can begin to fabricate and overcome these obstacles, but it would take an intelligence even more sophisticated than our own, more technically competent than our own to do this. So we can then conclude that the cause of the universe was intelligent. We'll end there, and then we'll come back in just a second with the summary of the study.